What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Absolute Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. With me, Mark Shue, Adam down there at the bottom at Always Auction, and we have a guest on here, guys. Kyle Senra of what's that? Going for two, the league winners, and the fantasy six pack. Kyle, what's going on, man?
Fantastic. Love to be here. Love the auction format and certainly love your guys' podcast. So happy to be part of it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. You're always hitting up on our videos. So I figured hearing your feedback on them, hearing your input, I was like, we got to get this guy on. So, Kyle, let us know what you're working on right now.
Yeah, so for sure. So you mentioned the three sites I'm with. Just real quick, one thing that dropped article-wise was a recent article for the league winners where focused mostly on the Green Bay Packers. So there was a free agency reaction article, graded the moves, the overall, let's say, lack of moves for the Packers. I don't know how Adam feels, but you go on that NFL.com free agent tracker page, and they're stuck on 4 free agent signings all year. Brought back a lot of restricted free agents. They've kind of maintained a lot of the team from last year, but haven't really necessarily upgraded at spots I would have liked to hope for them. So that's Packers stuff, but there's not much Packers because it really won't be relevant tonight because nothing they did has really any direct fantasy impact. So that'll be it for the Green Bay Packers. Nice story.
Yeah.
Going for 2 fantasy 6-pack, do some fantasy content. Going for 2, maybe some live stuff throughout the year. But for fantasy 6-pack, I just started a new show called Dynasty 6-pack, along with Jamie Pirogue and Rahul Natarajan. We're 2 episodes in, so every Wednesday at 9:30 Eastern, we go live on Fantasy 6-pack Network. So that's super fun,
nice.
And glad to have got that off the ground.
Yeah, man, that's great to hear. And we had a fun episode coming your guys' way. We have the fantasy winners and losers from this year's free agency class, and to kick it off, last night I went to sleep. Nothing big, nothing happened really. Just typical Sunday night. Wake up this morning, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both signed extensions, and obviously both are massive winners here right now. I mean, come on, how can we all hate that? What I hate though is the salary cap. 44% of their salary cap is now between Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Trey Hendrickson, please come to the Lions. Maybe that trade will happen. Show us something good. But I love the signing. Adam, how do you feel about the signing from last night? I mean, it was actually earlier for you because you being out in California, you said you were able to see it. So what was your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I caught it right before I went to bed because I do go to bed fairly early as well. But I mean, I love it for the Bengals. I love it for the offense. I was quite surprised that they were able to bring back Higgins. I didn't think they really had much of a chance to do that, but they obviously want to keep the band going and try to run it back. I think it's great for Joe Burrow. I think he's gonna have an absolutely monster season in 2025. And I was talking with one of our good friends on Twitter this morning, and I was like, if there's anyone who has a chance to replicate, Peyton Manning's incredible 2013 season this year, it's Joe Burrow. He's going to be throwing a ton. He's probably going to lead the league in passing yards, passing attempts. I mean, he could literally break records this year because they're going to have such a bad defense. They're going to have to air it out a bazillion times.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And I think one big winner of this one is going to be right over to you, Mark. And who's that big winner you think out of this deal outside of not Chase Higgins, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? Who's your biggest winner you think out of that?
I mean, for fantasy, it's got to be Joe Burrow. I mean, I was always kind of hoping that this would be. I mean, this is the best case outcome for him that he retains T. Higgins. The rookie route is not gonna pan out right away if they wanted to go that direction, and who is to say that they were gonna do that? So having 2 guys he trusts on the field with him at all times here, you might be looking for a little more. Help with running back, I think maybe in the draft, maybe. But they've got a good running back in Chase Brown behind them. Just signed Mike Gesicki, gave him a pretty good contract, to be honest, for Mike Gesicki. So all the guys that he kind of trusts around him are back. And honestly, this is why he's in my platinum tier, right? He's right now number 5 for me behind Jalen Hurts. But again, any one of those guys could be that number 1 guy.
Absolutely. And like looking at it, it's just like, man, oh man, like how's this team gonna stay together? Looking at it like, all right, you got the receivers, you have no defense, you have a questionable offensive line. They're gonna figure out how to make it work, but that's definitely a huge win right there in Joe Burrow. And who's your other winner in free agency too? Like if we look at it.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's the quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford getting Devontae Adams, the best wide receiver asset on the market, got the nicest contract. They had to get rid of Cooper Kupp to do it, and that's unfortunate that they couldn't get to the Super Bowl again with him. That would have been a really nice story, but I think ultimately we all kind of see on the field that Devontae Adams is probably able to provide what Cooper Kupp kind of hasn't been able to through health issues and just a little bit of a decline. So I think that Matthew Stafford getting that number one pass target. I mean, like these two teams, the Bengals and the Rams, not that far separated from a Super Bowl, and they probably have two of the best target funneled top two receivers for their core in the league here.
Mm-hmm. All right, Kyle. This is my favorite part, my friend. I want to know why this running back is a big winner in this free agency, and that's Najee Harris. Tell me why we should be buying in Najee Harris.
Well, it's a situation that we really like for running backs. As we saw last year, there was a bit of a splitting with Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins. There wasn't really necessarily a pass catching back because they didn't throw that much overall. But they ran the ball a ton, and they especially ran a lot inside the red zone and more specifically inside the 5. One of the things I do with Fantasy Six Pack in season was a series called the Goal Line Guide. It's a weekly sort of projection at where touchdowns will be scored, whether they'll be rushing or passing. And a lot of the stuff I'm looking at is inside the 5 data, what teams do when they're on offense inside the 5, but also what defenses allow when they're on defense inside their own 5. Anyway, inside the 5 this year, the chart, or last year, I guess now, the league year is rolled over. So now it's officially last year, 2024. But
yes,
in 2024, this first year with this Jim Harbaugh offense and Greg Roman, they ran 26 times inside the 5-yard line. The Chargers did inside their opponent's 5-yard line, compared to only passing it 10 times from that same area. I believe that's the fourth fewest pass attempts inside the opponent's 5-yard line in the entire NFL. So they were very run heavy, especially as they got close to the goal line. Splitting things between Dobbins and Edwards, this year it looks like Najee Harris could monopolize all of those goal line carries and have a lot of good touchdown upside. So might not have the receptions he did in his rookie season, where I believe he finished as a top 6 running back. And he's failed to live up to that since, but he might get his next best season since his rookie year here with the Chargers. That offense that certainly looks a lot more explosive, a lot more touchdown upside than it was with the Steelers. And up to this point, they haven't really signed a second option that looks anywhere close to as good as Jaylen Warren. I mean, is Kamani Vidal right now the Chargers' backup running back, and doesn't preclude them from drafting anyone. And so maybe after the NFL draft, this doesn't look as much of a winner. But right now, I think Najee Harris is definitely a big winner because of we didn't know where he was going to be and how bad it could be. Like, is he going to be splitting with someone? Is it going to be a 50-50 committee on a bad offense? Now it looks like he's got most of the work on a pretty good offense. So as far as situations go, he probably got one of the best landing spots, really, probably the best landing spot of any running back switching team.
Yeah, because remember how much we loved like J.K. Dobbins last year. He finally lived up to that potential that we all bought into when he first came into the league, and it took him having to switch to the Chargers where we saw him actually rebound. And to this, at the even time of this recording, he's still a free agent. So what's that tell you?
I mean, maybe the Chargers bring him back, right? I'm kind of now thinking that is that a risk right now? But don't love buying running backs this time of year. Still, I still think the best time to do it is after the NFL draft. But if you're looking for a cheap running back buy right now, maybe Najee is that.
Yeah, and Adam, you have 2 players from the same team who are actually winners from this free agency. Who's the one who really won out of this deal, do you think?
I mean, one of my biggest winners is Justin Fields. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Jets this episode because I think we've got some winners and possibly a loser on my list. But I'll start with Fields first. I mean, last year in the 6 starts he averaged almost 21 fantasy points a game. And if we eliminate the one game he got injured in last year, like over his last 17 starts going back to last year, he's put up quarterback one numbers in 12 of them. That's a 70% hit rate. That's pretty good. And their defense, in free agency, they just lost a few key players, and which means they're probably going to be playing from behind more than they were last year. And Fields is probably going to be racking up some really good garbage time points and just running and running and more and more running. So Fields is definitely one of my big winners this offseason or this fantasy free agency season. Anytime Fields has been a starter, he's put up points, plain and simple.
And then why is Wilson a winner on this? Like, I had a hard time with him last season, especially with
me too.
Aaron Rodgers, and it's like trying to get him to go on. But he was actually, I think he finished as like wide receiver 11 overall. So seeing Garrett Wilson as a winner from this with Fields, I think I know where you're going with this, but explain why he's a winner in this one.
So Fields is probably never going to pass at a really high rate, but the departure of Devontae Adams leaves 141 vacated targets just from last year. And as of right now, Allen Lazard is the number 2 wide receiver behind Garrett Wilson. That's not great. Wilson had 154 targets just last year, which was tied for 4th. I think he's easily going to match, if not eclipse that number this season. Who knows? He could be tied for the league in targets, maybe top 2. But I think when Fields does pass, he's going to be passing almost 100% of the time to Wilson. Wilson's probably going to average at least 10 targets a game, if not more.
That's going to be nuts, especially if that happens. And a thing that you didn't mention is when Fields was a starter back in Chicago, he hit DJ Moore, made him wide receiver 6 on the season. So Wilson could actually has potential to actually bounce back and be a fantasy relevant wide receiver 1 again. Hopefully, that wide receiver that we're looking for in our fantasy leagues. All right, Kyle.
I was going to touch on the Wilson Fields element here. And I'm looking at Fantasy Pros, their fantasy points per game and total points, and looking at PPR, and I'm filtering by week. And if you go up to weeks 1 through 8, Garrett Wilson was the wide receiver 6. And that's right around when Adams got there. So I think Adams' absence is a huge factor, as you mentioned, Allen Lazard being the number 2. Fields, I believe he and Wilson would have played together. I think it was probably the shortened 2020 season in college, but at Ohio State before Fields came out. But they at least would have had time together. It's been 5 years since that, but I'm sure that chemistry can regain itself pretty quickly. And so just the lack of a second guy to command targets. I mean, Wilson's going to be consistently getting targets every week. And I think he's, to me, kind of bounced back to being a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. And this might be the thing that kind of unlocks his potential. Even if the total volume is not there, his target share is probably going to be massive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right, Mark. So you listed a quarterback. Adam's listed a quarterback. One of my biggest winners out of this whole entire free agency has been Jayden Daniels. I mean, they traded for Deebo Samuel, from San Francisco. They signed Zach Ertz because Zach Ertz seems to be a guy who just will not fade away in the fantasy spotlight. He stands out. And then they trade for Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans. Like, you're just bolstering this offensive line. You're bolstering this offense in general. And looking at last season, Daniels finished, he was averaging around 24 plus points per game. Now with a new additional weapon, a beefier offensive line, he's easily a top 3 quarterback going into this next season and beyond, depending on how long they can actually keep this whole thing all together. So I love that signing with Jayden Daniels a lot. That's probably like my favorite signing. And I'm going to kick it over to you again, Kyle, because you have 2 wide receivers that I like, and I'm curious to why they were both winners in Khalil Shakir and Josh Palmer.
Well, I'll start with the obvious one. And Josh Palmer, after he finished his rookie contract with the Chargers, I mean, who knows where he was going to end up. And you go from a pretty good quarterback in Justin Herbert and you get to as good a quarterback in Josh Allen. And there's a chance, I guess, now that we've seen Allen especially throw downfield a lot, if Palmer gets career years potentially here with Josh Allen. So I think his opportunity in that offense, he's probably competing against Keon Coleman maybe the Bills draft another guy like they did with Keon Coleman last year. But looking at Palmer, I think he does get a big opportunity boost here with the Bills. And for Khalil Shakir, I think it's the fact that they didn't bring in anyone better than Josh Palmer. Like, this wasn't a team that spent big on Chris Godwin, right? Like, we expect Palmer to get targets, but for the most part, it looks like the offense is going to operate like it did last year. Khalil Shakir leading the way. I believe he had 100 targets. And the Bills were winning with this formula, so they're kind of inclined to just continue to use Khalil Shakir the way they did. I mean, they got to the AFC Championship game with this strategy. So considering the money they've given him, a 4-year contract paying him over $15 million per year, that kind of says, that right now with what they're paying Josh Allen, that's going to be the Bills' version of paying a wide receiver one money. They have no interest in going certainly the $40 million per year of Chase, or even what Higgins is getting. I calculated his average at almost $29 million per year. Bills feel like they can get their wide receiver one for half that in Khalil Shakir. So I think the fact that both of them are there's not some bigger threat. The biggest threat might be Dalton Kincaid if he can break out, but there's not some other big wide receiver threat there. A lot of guys that maybe we're expecting more from, and that means they all have the opportunity to feed. So, Shakir, Josh Palmer certainly goes up in value. I think Shakir will maintain what he did last year.
Does that make Josh Palmer the new Gabe Davis?
Yeah, it'll be a lot of that same type of downfield skill set. So probably a really low floor week to week, but there could be some spike weeks there. So probably a less expensive version of Gabe Davis, which you might get the exact same results, but feel better about it. But we'll be complaining less about it because he didn't cost as much, because he did. And that's until he gets a 4 touchdown game in a playoff game or something.
Oh my God, right?
But that's next year's problem.
All right, Mark. And then you had one big winner, and it's actually a nice aged veteran winner. And this quarterback, it's an older guy. He's on the I always like to say the back nine of his career. But why is Matthew Stafford a winner from this free agency?
Yeah, again, I just think that getting that extra receiver in Devontae Adams really helps bring him up to having just, again, one of the better wide receiving cores in the league. He's usually pretty hyper focused on one or two guys in that offense. So I imagine they're both going to take a large percentage of the targets that go through that offense. Stafford we've talked about it before, one of the better quarterbacks, and at least one of the contending quarterbacks in this NFL playoffs. Had the best offense, to go up against the Eagles. So I imagine they're going to be competing again. And while they do have a good young defense, like they're the reason the Rams go is because they can light it up any day of the week with that Sean McVay offense. So I think him being back, honestly, the contract restructure before any of this happened in free agency is really the confidence that started all of this and then sort of moved it forward. So for me, I think we kind of forget because Stafford really didn't go anywhere. Just that, they've extended him now, more to beyond this year, and he's making a pretty penny there. Making a good amount of money, and then he's got pass catching weapons, and he's well protected as well.
Nice. All right, Kyle, and then you put in a little extra credit for today. I was asking for 2. You gave 4 players that you like, but you and I agreed on this winner, and I like it a lot. But who in Denver do you like as the winner from the free agency here? You're on mute.
I would argue that's like Mark's point of okay, these receiver signings help the quarterback. And certainly I think Evan Engram signing with Denver not only helps Evan Ingram's value, this helps Bo Nix too. Sean Payton's offense does love a tight end to operate. It feels like they just didn't have that last year. So maybe we see a new dimension, and the season Bo Nix put up last year might not be a fluke. It might be very repeatable and continue to do this year in, year out. And for Evan Engram, because we know how much Sean Payton will put an emphasis on the tight end, it's an opportunity to go to a spot where he probably will see a lot of targets. I mean, I don't think it's out of the question that he leads the team in targets. I think the favorite right now is probably Courtland Sutton based on what he did last year. He's got the connection with Bo Nix. If I had to pick a player to lead the team in targets, I probably would pick Sutton, but Ingram's probably the second best option there. and I think probably not too far behind. So I think maybe it does help Sutton in the sense that defenses can't focus on him, especially potentially deeper levels of the field, whereas Engram will operate underneath. So just they complement each other really well. So you could argue that if this helps the offense be better, it really helps all three of those main pieces.
Yeah, and I really hope actually every angle helps more because Sutton was so much more touchdown dependent, especially like the back half of the season. You know, he was basically getting 32, 50 yards, 55. Like he had one game that was over 100, and that was week 13, and he had 102 yards. But outside of that, it was just pretty much he was really touchdown dependent. You know, it'd be one touchdown or no touchdowns, and like 5 for 50. You know, you're hoping for 10 PPR points at that point, but he was very touchdown dependent with the 8 that he had for the season, and the back half of the season was a big helper. But it could be with Bo Nix kicking up to that next level, and I like that addition of Evan Engram there a lot because he's not really like that tight end. He's more of that receiver. He's almost like the Jimmy Graham there now, and that's what Sean Payton loves. He wants that Jimmy Graham type of receiver there.
It's funny how Sutton used to not be the touchdown guy. I'm looking here, he's got 32 touchdowns in his career. 18 have come in the last 2 seasons, which means he would have had 14 in his first 5 years in the NFL. And I mean, he had 1 year where he basically missed the whole year on a torn ACL, but take those other 4 seasons and you don't even get what you've got in the last 2 years. Really only one of those is with Bo Nix. So that's maybe also a testament to Sutton has learned that scoring touchdowns is a skill set, and he's kind of figured it out now. Maybe it takes some guys a little longer to get that, but that's why I don't, wouldn't say touchdowns are fluky. Like I look at his 8 touchdowns, I don't see it as fluky because, in fact, if anything, it was lower than the year before. Like maybe we even see this number go up to a certain extent. So as he gets comfortable with Bo Nix, right? So it's back to the goal line guide. Part of the thing I like to do a lot is predict touchdowns preseason, but also in season, week to week. So definitely one of the things I do in part of my process is I project every team's touchdowns and try and see one of the things I utilize is how players score yards relative to touchdowns and what we expect from them. So what Sutton's done the last couple of years is shown maybe he does have that as a skill set. And we probably would have saw that, okay, that 10 touchdown season was a fluke in 2023 and getting 8 last year, maybe it's not so much a fluke. Evan Ingram's actually been the one that's struggled to score touchdowns through his career, even though he accumulates a ton of yards. So if anything, that's not taking away touchdown opportunities from Sutton because Ingram struggled so much there.
Yeah, and Ingram really struggled a lot last year, compared to the year prior to that. So maybe hopefully this nice bounce back for him. And then my last free agent signing that I actually feel like wasn't even signing. My free agent winner is Jaylen Warren. Now, looking at that backfield in Pittsburgh, there's no other running back there. Okay, yes, I signed Kenneth Gainwell via free agency here, but I don't see him as a threat. Warren has a possibility to actually be an RB2 in fantasy this upcoming season. And if you're able to draft him right now, especially in your auctions, you can get him super cheap right now as an RB2. And basically, you're getting him as an RB3, RB4 based on the value. And we were hoping that he was actually going to break out last season. That didn't happen. He kind of faltered. He actually regressed. He was actually averaging less than 9 PPR points a game. But the final 3 outings of the season, we actually saw that running back that we all drafted last season, in redraft. We're all excited, thinking he was going to be this running back. And then in Dynasty, I had him, and I'm like, man, this guy hasn't done anything for me. This sucks. But then he did it again. So he's pulled me back in. I'm back in on him. And I think this would be a great year. He's actually, if everything stays as is, and they don't draft a running back that's any value, because let's not forget, they did trade the 2nd-round pick for DK Metcalf. So they don't even have a 2nd-round pick anymore in Pittsburgh. So getting a running back 3rd round or later, I think it's be more later. So I don't think it's going to be that much of a threat. So definitely a massive winner there in Jaylen Warren for me.
I like it.
And then now let's start looking at our losers. Adam, it's been a minute. We're going to head back over to you, my friend. Who is one player that you feel might be one of the biggest losers and why?
So I've got another Jet to talk about, and this one is Breece Hall. I think he's a little under the radar, this season as being a loser. But, it's interesting. Hall has never scored more than 5 rushing touchdowns since coming into the league. And I really don't think his chances of scoring anymore with Justin Fields now as his quarterback, go up. Fields is going to vulture a lot of rushing touchdowns and just rushing touchdown opportunities, I think, away from Breece Hall. And, the Jets lost two of their best offensive linemen to free agency. That doesn't help. And I just think with all that together, I just don't see Hall having a great fantasy season in 2025. So to me, he's one of the big free agency losers this year.
Yeah, isn't that funny that you and I were talking about that last week? How I felt like Breece Hall was more of a loser than a winner with this whole getting Justin Fields there, and I felt the same way. Adam, like he wasn't like he had the receptions last season, but it wasn't like he had like that year two like bounce where he had like so many catches. He actually regressed this last season, and like you said, the touchdowns just aren't there for him. And how much is Justin Fields really going to steal from him? That's where you really got to look at. Like, David Montgomery was an RB1 when he was there with Justin Fields there in Chicago. Now you got Breece Hall. Yes, he's a huge dynasty asset. He's a top 10 running back in a lot of dynasty rankings, but I don't have him there. I have him just outside, like maybe number 13, I'd say, outside the top 12s. So looking at it like that, I'm more cautious like you are with him.
And I think even more than touchdowns, I am worried about receptions, like you're saying, Ryan. He had the same number of catches in 23 as he had targets in 2024. So Rodgers didn't seem to be targeting him as much as the collection of backup-esque quarterbacks they had in 2023, right? Maybe they're so bad at quarterback they didn't have a choice. I mean, certainly once Adams was there, everything was concentrated to Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. But I think we expect the passing volume overall to go down. And while we think Garrett Wilson's target share will be secure, a lot of those targets might come at the expense of, okay, Justin Fields isn't going to check down to a running back. He's going to run himself. So even more than touchdowns, I'm actually worried about receptions from Breece Hall. And that could be he only had 57 last year. We could see that dip even further.
Yeah, which is now starting to make me love Garrett Wilson even more.
And this is why we said on our running back tiers episode that we got Gibbs, we got Genty, we got Bijan Robinson, and then after that, there's a reason to trade away any one of those running backs after that. So, and then always come back during the season. You're gonna need a running back eventually. Come back when the season comes around. But that's why there's any good reason to trade a running back, because it all becomes very very shaky after sooner than you think.
Right. All right, Kyle. And then you have a loser that I'm actually interested in. How is Demarcus Robinson a loser in this free agency?
Yeah. Well, I think his role on the Rams last couple of years had been so secure, such a high volume passing offense. Matthew Stafford, right? He's typically been one of the highest pass attempt quarterbacks most of his career, to be honest. So you always had this thing where as the third target and really no viable tight end. I mean, maybe Tyler Higbee. He got injured again at the end of the season, I think, in the playoffs. So just like last year, we don't know when he's coming back. So that end of season stretch in 2023, and then what we saw a lot last year was Demarcus Robinson was getting the targets. And moving to the 49ers, I'm kind of concerned. It really feels like Jawan Jennings is going to kind of what we saw last year. I think he kind of maintains that role as a main target earner. If Ayuk's injury remains to be seen, but everyone does kind of predict the breakout of Ricky Pearsall. That's not to mention that you have George Kittle. You have the tight end that is going to gain consistent targets, unlike he had to contend with on the Rams. Like wide receiver 3 on the 49ers certainly I think is less valuable than wide receiver 3 on the Rams. Yeah. Robinson might be the wide receiver 4. So I think he's a big loser because the quality of offense are both great, but just how much the 49ers run, I really feel like Robinson went from being a really good late round pick to sleeper to almost undraftable now.
Oh my God, yeah. Speaking of undraftable, Mark, one receiver out there in Tampa Bay, definitely lost a lot of value in this whole signing of Chris Godwin.
Yeah,
who was the loser?
Especially because we're a dynasty show, and now this time of season we're a dynasty show, and there was some steam on old Jalen McMillan as we got out of the season, but I think with Godwin coming back, especially just the confidence that Tampa Bay had in signing him to a 3-year deal off the rip just kind of made it that, the Jalen McMillan thing is probably not going to happen. At least not this year. He's at best, competing to maybe be the third target with Cade Otton. And I think, honestly, there's a lot more chemistry shown between Baker and Cade than McMillan, at least throughout the season. And I think that's more repeatable at the very least. So I think McMillan is probably a guy, he might be coming up. That's not the youngest receiving core in the league. But I don't necessarily think that they're just going to, after one of these guys decides to retire or move on, that they're just going to go straight up with McMillan. So I would probably say if you can still get, any sort of dynasty recoup value, I would think about doing it before the season starts.
Yeah, I mean, especially now too. Like you look at him, like going in drafts, he's gonna be easily like a dollar player because everyone's gonna be looking at him late pick. One of those dollar throws as you try to fill out your bench because of the signing. And Mike Evans is also entering 2025 at 32, so he's not exactly on the young side. So it could be injury, something that you're going to need just for McMillan to be able to break out. But if it was Godwin would have left, we'd be loving McMillan right now. But we're not to that point, and that's what sucks. So, like you said, either you try to recoup it, try to trade away, or you hold and hope that something else happens. And then, as I said earlier about Jayden Daniels gaining Laramie Tunsil, who lost Laramie Tunsil? CJ Stroud. And I feel like CJ Stroud is a big loser because you don't have any wide receivers. Okay, you got Christian Kirk for a late round pick, but you lost a guard and now you lost your star left tackle. What is going to be protecting CJ Stroud? He hasn't exactly been the fantasy football type of quarterback that we hope he was going to be last season. Like, we were drafting him top 5, especially in Dynasty. Like, I seen some drafts where he was going as the QB1 overall. And I just thought that was way too high. But, so like I said, he lost Larry Tunsil. The guard's name was Kenyon Green, who went to Philadelphia. Tank Dell, could miss the entire 2025 season. We still don't know the Stephon Diggs. We have way too many question marks on this quarterback here and this whole team in general. I have a hard time drafting Stroud, especially when you lost basically over 6 fantasy points from his rookie season to the last season. And I think it's just going to be even worse. It could be that Trevor Lawrence type of fall, where we've seen Trevor Lawrence fall the last few years. Yes, I'm back into buying Trevor Lawrence still, but I still see this as a CJ Stroud fall. And I'm almost tempted not to. He's more of a back-end QB1 than close to actually. He's actually pushing borderline QB2, if I'm not going to say anything about that.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I definitely remember an auction last year I did is the salary cap contract league, and the largest total contract signed in the auction was CJ Stroud. I think Josh Allen, maybe another player, had a higher per year average, but Allen was definitely on a 3-year contract. And so, yeah, like I know I've got the Allen contract. So I know this year you look at the total cap hits, he's the highest, but that total overall value on a 4-year deal, Stroud was the largest contract signed. So that definitely was a thing where people were viewing him as the QB1 last year.
Yeah, like no one could replace him. And hopefully this is
Jayden
Daniels.
No, sorry, it absolutely tanked my listener league draft for the Absolute Auction League. I drafted CJ Stroud with my quarterback too, and it ruined me.
Hey man, it happens. But Mark, hey, we'll kick it. Actually, no. Okay, we're gonna kick it back over to you again here. So I love this running back. Last season, he's on a new team. I thought I loved it, but convince me why I shouldn't love it.
And I think Adam at one point had Chuba Hubbard as well as a loser, and you could kind of argue both really are about each other's presence. And Rico Dowdle going to Carolina, and I think loser in the sense of what if he had just re-signed in Dallas? If he just stays in Dallas, he's like the unquestioned lead back there again until the draft. But now he's behind someone that the Panthers have invested in. They invested a long-term contract extension to Chuba Hubbard coming off his rookie contract. I believe they signed him to a 4-year deal. So they've kind of already invested their money pretty heavily in Hubbard to say that Hubbard's probably going to be the guy given as many opportunities as they think he can. And it seems like I wonder if Rico Dowdle's being signed as we know we can't give Hubbard 100% of the touches. Someone else will have to touch the football, so it's going to be Dowdle. But I do wonder if, based on the money, what the team's telling us with money, and that's really all we can go on right now, is that Dowdle's the clear backup to Hubbard. Now, it might not be the case, and it might be bad news for Hubbard that this could just be a 50-50 split. And they're both getting enough of the touches, and it's really hard to predict. But I think even that's maybe the best case scenario for Dowdle. I don't really see him usurping and overcoming Chuba Hubbard, who I do view as a better, more talented running back. So I think Dowdle's upside, it really is a Hubbard injury, which any backup running back is that. But right now I'm kind of ranking Dowdle as a backup running back, and that hurts where he could have been. He could have been a starter at other spots. So I think that's why, to me, he ends up being a loser in free agency.
The thing that worries me a little bit for Chuba, honestly, just for this whole situation, I'm glad we're actually just talking about the situation in general, is as I feel like there is that small potential for Rico to maybe like take 2-minute work or something like that kind of pulls down his receiving average for Hubbard. I do think he's still probably a pretty solid running back too, but it does worry me a little bit that it kind of just like deflates that. And you know, he's going as a top 15 running back right now. I think he probably deserves that, but I do worry that it might not be as exciting as it was all year last year.
And we saw Bryce Young take a step forward. Or what happens if he takes a step back in this offense, struggling to score touchdowns, and you're already splitting something that's not overly productive. If they're really splitting things halfway, it could be really not a lot there at all. My answers are definitely. Sorry, I'm glad.
No, I mean, all I was going to say was it's really interesting. If you take a look at Hubbard and Dowdle's stats from last season, other than touchdowns, they're almost identical. I mean, Hubbard had a lot of touchdowns. Dowdle really didn't because Dallas just didn't have a good year. But their stats are almost identical. So I just worry that I think that Hubbard is still going to get the bulk of the workload. I think it could be like a, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears type of, split. But I just think that having Dowdle there potentially takes like the tippy top of the ceiling off of Hubbard's potential. So I do think that they're both, may cannibalize each other a little bit. But I still think, like Mark said, that Hubbard is absolutely still worth, a top 15 back.
Yeah, let's hope he can keep it up with it too. I like the Rico Dowdle signing. I thought he was actually going to stay in Dallas, and you look at his contract and Javonte Williams' contract, and people will say that it's basically the same. But Dowdle's contract, I think, had more incentive base to it, so where it actually could be worth like almost $7 million. So I know it's over $6 million. It's somewhere between $6 and $7 million is what Dowdle could actually make. So maybe they want a better tandem there, because I think that's what they were trying to do with Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks last season when they were trying to bring Jonathan Brooks back before he tore his ACL again. So they kind of don't want to have that Chuba have to take the whole offense on his back. And let's not forget, if Bryce Young keeps continuing as he was at the end of last season, he was the QB6 during that back end of the stretch from like week 13 to week 18. Mm-hmm. So if he's able to carry that into this season, this offense could be a lot of fun to watch.
I definitely know my answers are skewed by my nationality, right? I'm talking up Josh Palmer. Love seeing the Canadian sign the big contract, and here I'm kind of okay. I don't like Dowdle because he's behind the Canadian who also just signed a big contract. I'm seeing the Canadian NFL players get paid, so definitely a pro there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Everyone deserves to get paid. Let them get paid. Let them get their money. But speaking of getting money, one quarterback got 2 years, $14 million. Daniel Jones did in Indianapolis. Adam, is this good or bad for Anthony Richardson?
This is bad. I mean, are we even sure that Richardson is going to play in 2025? I don't know. I mean, the Colts, like you said, the Colts signed Jones, who I think could very easily beat out Richardson this offseason. And personally, in one quarterback leagues, I don't think you can even draft Richardson. And if you told me that you were in a superflex league and we're just going to completely avoid Richardson, I'd be like, I get it. Yeah, okay. And like the Jets, the Colts lost a couple of really key offensive linemen. And right now, there's just too much uncertainty for me. So I'm staying away from Anthony Richardson, big loser in free agency.
All right, so I was wrong. Daniel Jones signed a 1 year for $14 million. It wasn't 2 years. So, but let's not forget, to speak up Anthony Richardson, he is, with Chris Heiss, who does the same biometrics coach that helped but Bill's quarterback, Josh Allen, become what he is today. So maybe Anthony Richardson bounces back. But like you said, though, Adam, he wasn't the quarterback that we thought he was going to be and what we hope he was being. And his last 5 games, he was also benched for Joe Flacco, if that means anything to anyone.
The big thing here is there is still no real evidence to show that the team and the locker room has not been lost in a way that Anthony Richardson can't get it back before he said, "I'm tired. I'm out of the game for that one play."
Yeah.
I and honestly, like the way that the NFL works with the contracts, there is no way we're gonna know until he's never playing again. They will keep a charade going all offseason long. If they don't believe in Anthony Richardson and they were never gonna keep him, we're not gonna know until the season starts. So this can go on for a long time. But I mean, there's been no. I mean, when you get benched for Joe Flacco, like not just okay, they were in and you're injured for Flacco. If you're getting benched for Joe Flacco, like as a guy this early in your career when you were drafted that highly, it's really hard to come back from that. And I think that, at the very least, they're pulling up a reclamation project in Daniel Jones. They were probably going to have to do something like that anyway. But man, how are you going to bet on the Richardson side right now? It doesn't look good at all.
Because, I mean, Daniel Jones, we can say he has his flaws, but when it gets to training camp and if the coaches are just purely saying who's the better passer, they might lean to Daniel Jones starts week 1.
Right. Or how about the team just saying, I'm not blocking for this guy, or I'm not, like it's,
he's quitting on us.
That. Yeah.
But unfortunately, though, I don't think this really helps many Colts players because the big problem with Daniel Jones is he's not a good touchdown producer. So the one guy that might be helped by Daniel Jones is Jonathan Taylor. Maybe there's less vulturing of touchdowns and maybe just more passing attempts overall means more opportunities to get dump offs. But I don't love Michael Pittman or Josh Downs' touchdown upside with Daniel Jones really that much more than I do with Anthony Richardson. So it's tough to – you could really almost say all the Colts players are losers except, again, maybe Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Sorry, Colts fans. I just called your whole team losers.
That is scary, just knowing that. Even the breakout of Josh Downs, and that wasn't even really with Anthony Richardson. That was more with Joe Flacco. So a lot of the fantasy points that you got from your receivers was from Joe Flacco. But yes, I agree with you, Kyle. Definitely Jonathan Taylor will probably get the boost out of this deal. But I just look at Anthony Richardson just as I looked at Trey Lance. Everyone loved the raw talent, loved the arm, loved the speed of the legs. It's just, they just don't adapt. Not every player can adapt to how you want to. Not every quarterback guru can make you a best quarterback. Sometimes you're just a bust, and we're all starting to feel the same way on Anthony Richardson right now. But speaking of bust, I'm going to finish up my 2, and I'm going with DK Metcalf and George Pickens. I'm putting those 2 together as one player because realistically, they play the same exact position. So DK Metcalf wanted out. He wanted a quarterback, to throw to him. He got a 5-year, $150 million contract to go to Pittsburgh, and there's no quarterback there. I mean, is it even Mason Rudolph? I don't even know who's even there as the backup.
It's funny. I was just about to say, which quarterback competition seems worse? Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson or Mason Rudolph versus Skylar Thompson, who I believe is the quarterback right now.
But it's so hard to figure out what, and it's okay, well, why would you sign DK Metcalf when you already have George Pickens? And why would George Pickens want DK Metcalf? Because they're just gonna be fighting, and I thought they were gonna be fighting over the jersey number, but Pickens kept 14, Metcalf got 4, so there was no blood drawn on that as far as we know. But these 2 played the same exact position. They both kind of neutralize each other out. I feel like they're more wide receiver 3s at best, but I don't know who's throwing them the freaking ball. And like I said, out of the wonders, I'd rather have just give me Jaylen Warren, and that's all I want. Maybe Pat Freiermuth at best, but even if it's Aaron Rodgers, I don't want him. Maybe Russell Wilson, but because he has the DK Metcalf connection, but I don't know. It's just too many question marks for me to like, and I have a hard time trying to figure out what these 2 receivers are going to do with each other. How are they going to cancel each other out?
Are they trying to cater to Wilson? Because this does seem like a receiver core he would like, right? Like he loves to throw deep to the outside. You've got two guys as kind of those options. So it's a redundant skill set. But if your quarterback's going to throw a ton of those passes, it might work. And of the available quarterbacks, who's going to throw outside deep the most? It is Russell Wilson. So yeah, you're kind of banking that it's him, I think, at this point. Otherwise, you're hoping on a rookie, and that could turn out to be a disaster.
Yeah, but who's the offensive coordinator there in Pittsburgh?
Arthur Smith.
And what's Arthur Smith like to do? Ground and pound.
I mean, yeah, run the football, but I mean, to when Russ decides to throw, like those are the spots he's probably looking for.
That's true. Yeah, like he does like the wide receivers. He doesn't like tight ends, so maybe it's a bad idea for Pratt Firemouth. He didn't like Kyle
But if
Pitts
it's not
much.
Wilson and it's Rodgers, that is someone who might want to lean on the more short on middle throws, and maybe that does help. So you're still kind of waiting and seeing at quarterback, which I guess Rodgers and Wilson seem to be the two that are left in terms of the established throwers. I believe Jameis Winston's still a free agent. Like there's guys like Drew Lock available, so there are people there. I don't know how many are better than Mason Rudolph. There's got to be a few. But, we're starting to run out of chairs.
All right, and then Mark, you have one last loser as we wrap this up for the night. Who are we calling the final loser of this free agency class?
Yeah, it's unfortunately gonna have to be Cooper Kupp here. I think that he's always been a great receiver. Definitely moved his way down a little bit, the past couple of years with injury. He's going to Seattle, which I think is just going to be a much more run-heavy front with a guy like Sam Darnold behind him. I think that, he'll still be your wide receiver too on the field. He'll be there because he's a great pass blocker or a run blocker rather. And he can catch the ball thrown to him, but he can't do much after the fact anymore. And I think just the caliber of the offense we're looking at just doesn't really click with me I think this is just kind of that we're seeing. We have a young team. We want a quarterback in Sam Darnold. We want to develop as a team. We're using a nice veteran in Cooper Kupp to sort of help us block and sort of show that we have a hard-fought veteran out there kind of helping us here. But really the main target percentage is going to go to Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think it's really good for him the way this sets up, that it kind of like moves everything out of the way for him to kind of make his way. So I downgraded quarterback, downgrade the offensive line, and downgrade the fact that they're going to be throwing as much as they were when he was on the Rams, downgrading the fact that he's a step slower.
Downgrade the quarterback?
Downgrade the quarterback, sure. I mean,
yeah.
Hey, put Sam Darnold on the Rams and we'll see what happens. But I mean, it's hard to know exactly where we are. But I think we'll say downgrade the quarterback too.
Well, we did see them play head to head in the playoffs, and
that's
come
true.
out on top there. So
that's fair.
That's maybe the closest comparison we have.
That's when Sam Darnold started losing. Well, we thought he was actually starting to lose money, but he ended up getting a 3-year, $100.5 million contract. But come to find out, I guess it's really a 1-year, $37.5 million contract. So we'll see what he can actually do in a year after his first 6 years of kind of being a bust, and then last season being part of Kevin O'Connell's offense, kind of actually showing the Sam Darnold that we're all hoping for at one point.
To be honest, I don't think this is a horrible setup for the Seahawks to try and find. I mean, they just keep doing it. They're doing it with Geno. Okay, they're realizing, I can't get it with Geno. Send him to the Raiders. Let's get somebody else in here and try it. It's until you can get that top tier quarterback. It's not a bad deal to kind of recycle these reclamation projects.
I think the thought I'm kind of hearing a lot is that Geno was going to demand quite a lot as an extension, and the Seahawks weren't quite ready to do that. So while they're paying Sam Darnold, they still view this as they're paying less than they would have if they could have just run the season out with Geno and let him walk in free agency. So at least this way we get something for him. And next year we're not looking for a quarterback. If Darnold does work out, then we've got him next year. And I mean, if we are looking for a quarterback next year, then so be it. But at least try something a little cheaper than paying for the ceiling of Geno. And just to the last topic we talked about, Metcalf and Pickens with similar skill sets. Does seem a little redundant though. Like 2 receivers that seem to operate best in the slot. I wonder if that signals with Cooper Kupp signing, are the Seahawks planning to move JSN to the outside and have him be more of a downfield threat? Maybe that does help him. His yards for the catch certainly could go up, but does that also maybe hurt his catch rate by doing so? So it's I'm still a little hesitant on JSN if this is truly a good thing for him to really raise his value. I think he and Garrett Wilson, I think we might have been thinking pretty similarly before free agency, and now post free agency, I think I'm definitely leaning towards Wilson being tied to Justin Fields as opposed to JSN here tied to Sam Darnold and maybe having to win on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Wild. I don't know, too. And another thing to look at, too, is Seattle's offensive line isn't exactly as good as what Minnesota had for an offensive line, too. So that's another downgrade to help if you're against Sam Darnold or trying to say something bad about that whole team.
I don't know. The last couple games, I don't know if the Vikings all line looked that great.
No, it didn't. But, could be the December woes.
Or, maybe the Lions are just a good team, and that's what.
I will agree with you on that 100%. The Lions are a good team. Yes. I'm not being a biased Lion fan, but yes, they are a good team.
Catering to the host.
Yeah.
Back.
All right, guys. We're wrapping up here. Kyle, let everyone know where they can find you and what else you're working on right now.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Senra Says. Like I mentioned, with Fantasy Six Pack going for 2 in the League Winners. League Winners is mostly just articles. Fantasy Six Pack will be a mix of both. The Dynasty Six Pack show live every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel. I think there's a lot of Facebook posts about it too, so the Dynasty Six Pack Facebook as well. And so mix of both there. And with Going for 2 live, we do this thing called PLPs, Personal League Podcast. So it's a paid product where you get I think it's roughly about $100. So it's just for 12-team leagues, it's less than $10 per manager, and we will do a detailed podcast on your league. We'll get all the rosters, and a few of us will rank the teams, but we'll also each talk about each team and what moves that can be made depending on time of year. Is this pre-rookie draft? We might say today, okay, well, this is what we might do with the rookie picks, or post-rookie draft, and thinking of moves to make for the season. So the Personal League Podcast is part of the Going for 2 Live Network. On goingfor2.com, there is a page that they fill out the information for that. So appreciate coming on here, though. I absolutely love the Absolute Auction Podcast. And, not to be the guy that invites myself back, but I definitely would love to come back during the offseason at some point to specifically talk about auction.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially about par sheets and how you create them. So I definitely think it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, they'll definitely be coming up here soon. We'll probably start doing that. I think it's in June when we start doing the redraft side of it. This year, it's the first year we started doing
past the rookies.
Rookie drafts in May. That's a good way to cater to the league schedule. And league
exactly. Yeah, like doing this dynasty side of it's been a lot more interesting and fun as we try to adapt it with real life and then also the auction side of it. So glad to have you on, Kyle. And be sure to check out everything you're doing over there too. I mean, you're doing so much. It's like, man, I can't keep up with you on this stuff. That's great. Good for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, Mark, Adam, we all set, guys?
We're good.
All right.
Yeah.
That's the Absolute Auction Podcast. Like and subscribe down below, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.